My daughter told her husband's family I was just crashing with them temporarily. I'd been paying their mortgage for 6 years. I didn't say a word that night. I just drove home to their home, the one I'd been paying for, and made myself a cup of coffee. Then I opened my laptop and started making 3 phone calls that would change everything. My daughter's name is Melissa. No, wait, let me start over because that's not how this story begins. This story begins in 1987 in a 2-bedroom apartment in Columbus, Ohio, where my wife Sandra and I slept on a mattress on the floor because we'd spent every last dollar on equipment for the dry cleaning business I was trying to build. My name is George Whitmore. I'm 64 years old. I spent 38 years building Whitmore's Cleaners from a single storefront on High Street into a 4-location operation that employed 47 people at its peak. I pressed other people's suits at 5 in the morning and balanced the books at midnight. I missed school plays and birthday dinners. I drove a 2003 Chevy pickup until 2019 because every dollar that wasn't paying a salary or buying equipment went into savings. My wife Sandra understood that. She worked the front counter for 12 years before the kids came, and even after, she kept the books while managing 2 children in a house. We built something, not glamorous, not the kind of thing you'd put on Instagram, but real. The kind of real that meant when my daughter went to Ohio State, she did it without a single loan. When she went to Northwestern for her MBA, I wrote checks totaling $118,000 over 2 years and told her it was an investment in her future. Her name is Ashley. She graduated from Northwestern in 2009, landed a job at a consulting firm in Chicago, and met her husband Derek at some rooftop party in Wicker Park 2 years later. Derek came from money, or he talked like he did. His father was a dentist in Naperville. His mother volunteered at the Art Institute, and he had the particular confidence of someone who had never once worried about whether the lights would stay on. I liked him well enough from the beginning. He was smart, presentable, and he made my daughter happy. That was enough for me. The first sign I should have paid attention to came at their rehearsal dinner. We were at a restaurant in Lincoln Park, Derek's parents' choice, and Derek was introducing me to his college friends. 2 of them asked what I did for a living. I said I owned a dry cleaning business in Columbus. One of them nodded politely. The other one smiled and said, "Oh, like a franchise?" I said no, independent, 4 locations. He nodded again and turned back to his drink. Later that night, I heard Derek telling someone I was in retail services. Not incorrect, I supposed, but not exactly how I would have phrased it. Ashley and Derek got married in 2014. Beautiful wedding in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. My contribution, $42,000 for the venue, catering, and flowers. Derek's parents contributed a crystal vase and a card. I didn't make an issue of it. 2 years into their marriage, they started talking about buying a house. They were renting a 2-bedroom in Lincoln Park, paying $2,800 a month, and Ashley mentioned they were having trouble saving for a down payment because Chicago was expensive and their student loans were heavy. I understood. Chicago is expensive. So I sat down with them at their kitchen table one Sunday afternoon and I made them an offer. I would buy a house in their name. Not the gift, I made that clear. An arrangement. I would cover the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance. They would live there, build equity, and when the time was right, we would reassess. I wanted to be close to them when grandchildren came, and I was starting to think about slowing down at work, maybe spending more time in Chicago. The house was on a quiet street in Evanston. 4 bedrooms, good school district, a backyard big enough for a garden. I paid $580,000 for it in 2016. Over the next 6 years, I covered every mortgage payment, every property tax bill, every repair. New roof in 2018, $14,000. Furnace replacement in 2020, $8,200. Kitchen renovation in 2021. Ashley's idea, Derek supported it, $31,000. I paid for all of it. I moved into the house in 2019 after Sandra passed. Cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to the end. Ashley was attentive during that period. She flew to Columbus several times. She was genuinely grieving. I don't question that. After the funeral, she suggested I sell the Columbus house and come stay with them in Evanston. "Dad, you shouldn't be alone," she said. "And the house has plenty of room." I sold the Columbus house, took the equity, about $310,000, and put it in savings, closed the dry cleaning business in phases over 2020, sold the equipment and lease rights for $2020. My total net worth at that point sat somewhere north of $2.3 million. Not a fortune by some standards, but I'd earned every dollar of it on my feet. I moved into the Evanston house with a suitcase and my late wife's blue ceramic mixing bowl. I told myself it was temporary, that I would figure out what came next. What came next was 3 years of learning exactly what my son-in-law thought of me. It started subtle. Derek worked from home 3 days a week, and when his colleagues joined video calls, he would close the door to his office. Fine, I understood, but once I happened to walk past when the door was open a crack, and I heard him say, "Sorry about the noise, my wife's father's staying with us for a while." Staying with us. Like I was a house guest who'd overstayed a welcome I'd never been given. Ashley noticed me standing in the hallway afterward. She didn't say anything, neither did I. The next sign was the garage. I'd been parking my truck in the driveway since I moved in. One Saturday morning, Derek asked, very pleasantly, if I could start parking on the street. He and Ashley had bought a second car, a Volvo, white, leased at $620 a month, and they needed the driveway for both vehicles. His reasoning was polite. The request was reasonable on its surface, but I was paying the mortgage on the property that held the driveway, and neither of them had thought to mention that when they signed the lease. I parked on the street, started keeping a note in my head. The worst period was the year they started hosting dinner parties. Ashley's friends from Northwestern, Derek's colleagues, neighbors from the block, there were gatherings every few weeks, catered cheese boards, bottles of natural wine that cost more than I used to pay for a week of groceries in 1987. I was always invited, always included technically, but Derek had a way of handling my presence in those rooms that I cannot fully describe except to say it felt like being a piece of furniture that had been placed slightly wrong. He'd introduce me to people and then smoothly redirect the conversation. He never asked me to tell stories about the business. When someone once asked how long I'd been in Chicago, Derek jumped in. "My father-in-law moved in with us a few years ago. He's been a great help around the house." A great help around the house. I had, in fact, started doing some of the household maintenance. I fixed the garbage disposal. I repainted the back porch. I mowed the lawn twice a week because I couldn't sit still. I'd worked my whole life. I didn't know how to be idle, but hearing it framed as my contribution, a great help around the house, after 6 years of mortgage payments and a $31,000 kitchen renovation, that one sat with me. I didn't say anything, kept my note in my head. The moment that broke everything open happened on a Sunday in September 2022. Derek's sister was visiting from Atlanta with her husband and their 2 college-age sons. Nice enough family. His parents drove up from Naperville. 8 people for dinner. Ashley had made a pot roast, and I'd spent most of Saturday making my mother's apple cake, the one that takes 4 hours because the filling has to cool twice. Sandra used to say it was the best thing anyone had ever put in her mouth. We were all at the dinner table. Derek's father, pleasant man, dentist's hands, firm handshake, asked how everyone was connected. One of Derek's nephews, maybe 20 years old, pointed at me and asked Derek, "And who's this?" Derek looked at me for half a second. Then he looked back at his nephew and said, "That's George. He's been crashing with us for a while. Long-term house guest situation." Long-term house guest situation. Ashley was looking at her plate. Derek's mother looked confused. His father nodded vaguely. His nephews moved on. The conversation shifted to someone's fantasy football team. I ate my pot roast. I had 2 slices of the apple cake. I said goodnight to everyone and went upstairs to the bedroom I'd been sleeping in for 3 years. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called my accountant. The next morning, I drove to the Harris Bank branch on Davis Street. I'd been working with the same advisor there for 4 years. a woman named Patricia Okafor, who had helped me structure the sale of the dry cleaning business. She was expecting me. "George, good to see you," she said. "What are we looking at today?" "I need to understand my options," I said, "specifically regarding the property in Evanston." She pulled up everything on her screen. The house was in Ashley's name. We'd arranged it that way in 2016 for estate planning reasons that had made sense at the time. I was not on the deed, but every mortgage payment, 6 years of them, had been made via automatic transfer from my accounts. I had documentation going back to day one, canceled checks, bank records, transfer confirmations. "If you want to stop making payments," Patricia said carefully, "that's within your rights. The mortgage obligation is hers." "I don't want to stop payments yet," I said. "I want to understand the full picture first." Second stop, an estate planning attorney on Chicago Avenue named Robert Finch, who came recommended by my accountant. He was in his 50s, methodical, the kind of man who asked 3 clarifying questions before he spoke. I explained the entire arrangement. "You've been voluntarily funding this household for 6 years," he said. "Correct." "And you have no legal claim to the property." "Correct." "And you're considering ending the arrangement." "I'm considering my options," I said. "I have a nephew who's been trying to get his electrical contracting business off the ground in Cincinnati. My late wife's sister has a granddaughter, 22 years old, just graduated from nursing school in Dayton. Can't afford rent and student loans at the same time. I've been meaning to do something about both of those situations for a while." Robert Finch looked at me for a moment. "How much are we talking?" "Enough to change their trajectories," I said. "I built a business on nothing. I know what a real foundation looks like versus a head start. I want to give them both." Third stop, the one I had been turning over in my mind since I sat on the edge of that bed the night before. I drove to the Evanston assessor's office and pulled the public records on the house. Then I drove past it slowly on my way home, looked at the new front door I'd paid to have installed in 2021, the garden Ashley had planted along the fence line, the driveway where my truck used to sit. Then I drove to a real estate attorney's office and asked a single question. If the named owner of a property stops making mortgage payments and the property goes into default, what are the timelines and remedies? He walked me through everything. I thanked him and left. Over the following 3 weeks, I did not change a single thing in my daily routine. I made coffee in the morning. I mowed the lawn. I ate dinner with Ashley and Derek and watched television in the evenings. I helped Ashley carry groceries in from the car. Derek barely looked up from his phone. But I was moving money. Quietly, methodically, the way I'd always run the business. I opened a separate account at a different bank. I began transferring my savings, not all at once, nothing that would trigger flags or alarm anyone. I called my nephew Kevin. I told him I wanted to invest in his electrical business. He went quiet for a long time. "Uncle George," he finally said, "are you serious?" I told him to send me his business plan and his outstanding invoices. Kevin is 34 years old. He and his wife Darlene have been running a legitimate business for 3 years on a shoestring. Good reputation, solid work, not enough capital. The kind of situation I recognized because I had lived it. I sent him $95,000. I called Sandra's grandniece, Brianna. She was living with 2 roommates in a 1-bedroom apartment in Dayton, working night shifts at a hospital and paying $380 a month in student loan payments. I told her I wanted to help her get stable. She said she didn't want charity. I said it wasn't charity. It was a loan with no interest and no timeline. And if she ever wanted to pay it back, she could. But if she couldn't, that was fine too. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Aunt Sandra used to talk about you all the time." That hit me somewhere I wasn't prepared for. I sent her $60,000. I started spending weekends in Columbus, which is something I hadn't done since Sandra died. I had coffee with old friends. I drove past the old storefronts. I sat in the parking lot of the first location for a long time one afternoon, remembering what it felt like to open those doors for the first time. Ashley asked me once where I'd been going on weekends. I said I was catching up with friends. She seemed relieved, honestly. More space in the house. The October night everything changed started without any drama. Derek's college roommate was visiting from New York, a finance guy named Todd, the kind of person who describes himself as in private equity without anyone asking. They'd gone to Indiana University together, had been friends for 20 years. Todd's wife was a former event planner who had pivoted to lifestyle content. They had 180,000 followers on Instagram and posted exclusively from places that cost money to be in. Ashley had made the dinner into something of an event. New tablecloth, flowers from the shop on Central, the good wine glasses. She'd ordered food from a restaurant downtown. None of my cooking, despite the fact that I'd offered. Derek had spent the afternoon cleaning the house in a way I recognized. The particular energy of someone who wants things to look a certain way for people who are judging them. I was there, invited technically, sat at the far end of the table. It started over dessert. Todd asked about the house. He'd been admiring the kitchen, the finishes, the backyard. Derek, man, this place is incredible. What did you guys pay for it? Derek leaned back in his chair. Ashley glanced at him. We invested heavily in it, he said. The renovation alone was significant, but Evanston's market has been strong, so it's worked out. We invested. I sat down my fork. Todd's wife was looking around the kitchen admiringly. Who designed it? It has such a specific sensibility. Ashley has a great eye, Derek said. She basically ran the whole renovation. The kitchen I had paid $31,000 for. The one I had been consulted on exactly once. When Ashley asked if I thought the quartz countertops were worth the upgrade, I said yes. I also wrote the check. I looked at Derek. He was smiling at his old friend. I looked at Ashley. She was looking at her dessert plate. Todd asked pleasantly, the way people do when they're making conversation. And George, how do you fit into all this? There was a pause. Derek answered for me. George has been living with us since his wife passed. He helps out around the house, keeps things running. He paused for exactly one beat, and then he added, honestly, I don't know what we'd do without him. He's great with the lawnmower. Great with the lawnmower. I have a James Beard Foundation certificate on a wall somewhere from 2003, when Whitmore's Catering, a side operation I ran out of our Columbus kitchen for 8 years, was nominated for a Community Business Award. I have 47 people who worked for me over 3 decades and still send Christmas cards. I have a community in Columbus that named a Little League field after Sandra in 2020 because we donated to their program for 15 years. And I was great with the lawnmower. I excused myself from the table, went upstairs, sat down at my desk. I called Patricia Okafor at home. She picked up after 2 rings. Patricia, I said, we're moving to phase 2. How soon? 30 days. The next morning was a Thursday. Derek left for the office early. Ashley was working from home. I made coffee for both of us and sat down across from her at the kitchen table. I want to talk to you about the house, I said. She looked up from her laptop. What about it? I'm going to stop making the mortgage payments at the end of next month. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. She closed her laptop slowly. Dad. I've been paying this mortgage for 6 years, Ashley. 6 years, plus the taxes, plus the insurance, plus every repair that came up. I paid for this kitchen you and Derek take credit for at dinner parties. That's not fair. I heard what he said last night. I heard what he said in September in front of his family. Long-term house guest situation. Great with the lawnmower. I've been watching this for 3 years, and I haven't said a word because I didn't want to cause problems. But I'm 64 years old, and I watched your mother die, and I've been sitting in this house feeling invisible for long enough. Ashley's eyes were filling. Dad, Derek doesn't mean anything by it. Whether he means it or not, it's what he says, and you let him say it. That last sentence landed differently than I expected. She didn't respond to it. What are you going to do? She asked quietly. I'm going to move to Cincinnati and be near Kevin. He's building something and he needs help, and I know how to help him. I've already transferred funds to get his business properly capitalized." "You gave Kevin money?" "Quite a bit of it, yes. And I've helped Brianna, Sandra's grandniece, get stable. She's a good kid working too hard for not enough. Sandra would have wanted that." Ashley was quiet for a long moment. "How much did you give them?" "Enough. The rest is going toward my own housing and living expenses, and whatever Kevin's business needs as it grows. I've also made arrangements with my estate attorney. I did that last month." "Dad, the mortgage is in your name. The payment is due the first of the month. I would suggest you and Derek have a conversation about your finances before then, because I won't be covering it. The house is worth well over $800,000 in today's market. You have options." I stood up, rinsed my coffee mug, and went upstairs to begin packing. "I want to tell you about the dinner party because that's where it all came together." Ashley and Derek had been planning a housewarming of sorts for their friend group. This had been scheduled for weeks before our conversation. 15 people, catered, the kind of thing Derek liked to host. By the time the date arrived, I was mostly packed. My bedroom looked like a hotel checkout. I had one bag left to deal with, and my mother's mixing bowl wrapped in a dish towel on the dresser. I had, to Ashley's evident surprise, agreed to stay through the party. She'd asked me to, and I had said yes because there was something I needed to say, and that room full of people was the right place to say it. The guests arrived at 7. Derek was in full hosting mode, affable, polished, the version of himself that he curated for public consumption. He introduced me to his colleagues as our live-in handyman, which got a polite laugh. I smiled. Midway through the evening, Derek was holding court near the kitchen island, telling a story about a deal his firm had closed. His audience included 3 colleagues, 2 neighbors, and Ashley, who was half listening while refilling wine glasses. One of the neighbors, an older woman who had met me walking her dog several times over the years, asked Derek directly, "How long has Ashley's father been living here with you?" "Old George has been with us since his wife passed," Derek said. "He doesn't have anywhere else to be, so we made room. You do what you can for family. He doesn't have anywhere else to be." I set down my wine glass. "Actually," I said, "I'm leaving in the morning." The conversation stopped. Derek looked at me. Ashley went still. "I have a place in Cincinnati, near my nephew's family. I've been looking forward to it." I looked around the room. 15 people, including 2 of Derek's partners from work. "Before I go, I want to say something because I think some of you don't know the full picture of this house." Derek said very quietly, "George, the mortgage on this property has been paid by me, out of my accounts, every single month for 6 years. The kitchen renovation you've been complimenting all evening, $31,000 charged to my account. The roof you'll probably never have to think about, $14,000 in 2018. This house is in my daughter's name, but it exists the way it exists because of 40 years of running a business in Columbus, Ohio, standing on concrete floors, pressing other people's suits at 5 in the morning, and not spending money I didn't have." The room was very quiet. "My son-in-law has been introducing me to people as the handyman, the lawnmower guy, the house guest who doesn't have anywhere to be. I've let that go for a long time. I'm not angry about it tonight. I just think it's worth saying clearly in a room full of people before I leave." I picked my wine glass back up. "I hope you all enjoy the house. It's a good house." I picked it. One of Derek's work colleagues, a woman in her 40s who had been listening carefully, caught my eye and gave me a small, definite nod. Derek did not speak for the remainder of the evening. Ashley found me later by the back door, standing in the garden she planted along the fence. The petunias were still blooming. She'd done a good job with them. "Dad," she said. She didn't say anything else for a minute. Then, "I'm sorry." "I know you are." I should have said something. When he did it, all those times. "Yes," I said, "you should have." She was crying quietly. I put my arm around her. We stood there for a while. The party noise from inside felt very far away. "Are you ever going to come back?" she asked. "For visits, Of course. You're my daughter. That doesn't change. I paused. But I'm not going to fund a life where I'm invisible in it. That I'm done with. I left the next morning at 7. My truck was packed the night before. I took my suitcase, Sandra's mixing bowl, and a framed photo of the first Whitmore's cleaners location from 1987, back when the sign out front was hand-painted because we couldn't afford a real one. I was on the highway before most of the street was awake. Kevin met me at the door of his house in Cincinnati with his 3 kids and his wife Darlene, who pressed a cup of coffee into my hands before I'd even set my bag down. Their youngest, who was 4, immediately showed me a crayon drawing she'd done and explained it for approximately 6 minutes. I understood about half of it. It was wonderful. Kevin's business has grown considerably. The $95,000 I put in allowed him to hire 2 additional electricians and bid on commercial contracts he'd previously had to pass on. By spring, he had 12 employees. By summer, he'd landed a contract with a school district renovation project. He calls me every few days, not to report in, but because he wants to. He asks what I think. He tells me what's working and what isn't. He argues with me sometimes, and he's occasionally right about it. Brianna finished her loan payoff ahead of schedule and is renting her own apartment now. She came to Cincinnati for Thanksgiving, and she and Darlene spent 4 hours in the kitchen together. I watched from the living room and thought about Sandra constantly and didn't mind it at all. Ashley and I talk once a week. She and Derek are managing the mortgage now. They refinanced, tapped the equity, made it work. I don't ask for details. It's not my situation anymore. She came to Cincinnati for a weekend in the fall, and we drove around and ate at a diner I liked. And she cried a little in the car, and I told her I wasn't going anywhere, just somewhere different. Derek called me once, left a voicemail, said he wanted to apologize, that he'd been thinking about it, that he hadn't realized how it sounded. I listened to it twice. I haven't called back yet. I'm not sure I will. Some apologies are real, and some are just someone realizing the thing they lost was more valuable than they thought. I'm not certain which kind his is. Maybe I'll find out eventually. In the meantime, I wake up at 6 and make coffee in a kitchen that is mine. I have a workbench in the garage, and I fix things when they need fixing. And when they don't need fixing, I find other things to do. Kevin's wife brings dinner over on Sundays. His kids call me Pop Pop, which I did not ask for and would not trade for anything. I spent 40 years making something out of nothing. I know what that costs. I know what it's worth. And I've learned, late but not too late, that the people who understand what it cost you are the ones worth spending the time you have left with. Sandra would have known that from the beginning. She always did. I keep thinking about that apple cake. 4 hours to make it right. The filling cooled twice the way my mother taught me. Sandra used to say it was the best thing she'd ever tasted. I made it that Sunday for people who didn't ask what went into it. And when the evening was over, I went upstairs and sat on the edge of a bed in a house I'd been paying for, and I thought, how long have I been making the cake and pretending the table is level? What happened to Derek wasn't bad luck. What happened was a direct result of what he chose to do repeatedly over years in front of witnesses and in private. He called me a lawnmower guy. He called me a house guest with nowhere to be. He said, "We invested in this kitchen, about a kitchen I paid for." None of that was careless. It was a habit. And habits have weight. They accumulate. Eventually, they tip something over. I don't think Derek is a bad person exactly. I think he was someone who never had to consider what things cost. Not in money, not in effort, not in years of standing on a concrete floor until your feet ache. When you grow up without that weight, you can move through the world taking credit for rooms you didn't build, and it doesn't feel dishonest. It just feels like your life. That's the part that's hard to fix, because you can't teach someone to feel the weight of something they've never had to carry. Ashley knew. That's what I said to her in the garden that night, and what I still believe. She knew, and she said nothing, and there was a cost to that too. Not the same cost as Derek's, but real. The people we love don't become invisible because someone else decides they are. They become invisible because we allow the decision to stand. What I did Stopping the payments, moving to Cincinnati, putting money toward Kevin's business and Brianna's stability. None of that was revenge in the way people think of revenge. It was just me finally acting like the person I'd always been, instead of the one I'd been letting them turn me into. I worked for 38 years. I built something. I made decisions every day that required me to be clear-eyed and disciplined and willing to eat the hard years without complaining. That doesn't disappear because someone calls you the lawnmower guy. But it does go quiet if you let it, and I had let it go quiet for too long. Kevin understands what things cost. Brianna understands. His youngest daughter explaining her crayon drawing to me for 6 minutes. Understood in whatever way a 4-year-old understands anything important. That's the thing about people who've had to work for what they have. They know the difference between something built and something assumed. I think about Sandra a lot in the mornings now. She would have seen Derek clearly from the beginning and said something kind but accurate about it over coffee, the way she always did. She had that gift, the ability to be right about people without being cruel about it. I'm still working on the second part, but I've gotten better at the first. The mixing bowl is on my kitchen counter in Cincinnati. I made the apple cake last month for Kevin's family. His kids ate 3 pieces each and asked if I could make it every week. I told them I'd think about it. I was already thinking yes.